Veteran on the Move, episode number 2. Welcome to Veteran on the Move, your pathfinder to freedom. If you're a transitioning veteran, an entrepreneur wannabe, or someone who's still stuck in that job trying to escape, this podcast is dedicated to your success. So welcome aboard, sit back, and enjoy the ride. Today we're talking with Tim LawDawg Lawson, founder and CEO of Lawson Entertainment, and he's also the host of the Veteran Empire podcast. Tim is a veteran Marine, embassy guard, and also an entrepreneur. All right, Tim, thanks for joining us today. And since you're a Marine veteran, would you mind touching real quickly on what you did in the Marine Corps?
Yeah, so I got in as a 6672 aviation supply specialist, but when I was in boot camp, I heard one of my drill instructors say that the Marine Security Guard program was the best kept secret in the Marine Corps. My interest was already peaked, and so when I got to MOS school, as I was learning how to do my job in the Marine Corps, I was actually studying up on the MSG program and what it took to be an MSG. I ended up in New River in Jacksonville, North Carolina, MCS New River, where I was doing supply, but just I kept waiting around for the MSG monitor to come to base. He finally did, and I was gung-ho on becoming an MSG and was able to make it happen and serve 3 years overseas, posted in Algeria, Russia, and Peru.
Wow, it's quite some worldly experience you got there, and I know the Marine Corps does not pick its MSGs lightly. So obviously, is a testament to the caliber of individual you are. So
absolutely, thank you.
So talk about your transition out of the Marine Corps and how you decided to become an entrepreneur.
Yeah, well, I mean, when I got out of the Marine Corps, I moved to California with my at-time girlfriend, and I started doing what most veterans do, and I started applying for jobs that I was qualified for. Right. So as a MSG, I started applying for security jobs. So I was getting, doorman and I got loss prevention. I ended up doing some security for a little bit, but nothing that was really satisfying. Nothing fulfilled me. Nothing was challenging. I didn't want to have to care about half the things that I was being told to care about. Like when I was in loss prevention, I had to care when employees came back 10 minutes late from lunch because that's technically time theft. And I was just like, after serving at the embassy in Moscow, Russia, where like every day I'm serving a real purpose for the United States government. I'm like, I just can't do this. This is I'm gonna drive myself crazy if I try to keep pursuing this. So. I decided one day I was doing a podcast. I just finished the Veteran Empire podcast, and I sat there and I was like, I should just do this. This is what I like doing, and I'm clearly good at it, and I'm only getting better. And I have plenty of ideas for how this could be successful and how I could build a career off this. So I decided to start Lawson Entertainment, and I conceptualized a couple of the podcasts that I wanted to do. Veteran Empire ended up getting nominated for an award, which was sort of validation to me that that I was getting better and that there was success right around the corner. And just recently I launched the One Too Many project. It's going to be a podcast series that tells the stories behind veteran suicide. Just in the past, so it's Lawson Entertainment officially started just over a year ago. And it's already taken a huge leap towards success and being something that I'm going to love doing. And that to more directly answer your question on what made me decide to be an entrepreneur, didn't want to have to answer anybody. I mean, I got to the point where I knew in those few jobs that I had that I didn't want to. People couldn't pay me enough to. Well, that's true they could, but people weren't willing to pay me enough to care about the things they want me to care about, and I didn't want to. I wanted to be able to live a mobile lifestyle. I wanted to be able to, if someone invited me to do something on Friday out of town, I wanted to be able to say yes, immediately, and then just move around my own schedule versus having to ask 2 or 3 people if it was okay if I took the day off. So that's what initially motivated me to be an entrepreneur.
Now, how did you get nominated to be the Veteran Empire podcast show host?
Yeah, so back when I was living in California, one of my friends, Q, who was a Marine in Moscow with me. He told me about, I guess this actually goes back to when I was on the MSP program, was telling me about Veteran Empire, and he sent me the logo. And as soon as I saw the logo, I was like, oh, this is going to be big. So I told him I wanted to be involved, and him and his business partner were still sort of trying to figure out what they wanted to do with it. And by the time I'd gotten to California, I was like, hey man, let me run your Twitter. Cause I was at the time I wasn't a Twitter, neither of them were. And I was like, you need to have a presence on Twitter. So I started for about a month. I was running their Twitter handle. I was doing another podcast called A Couple Good Ideas, which was a relationship podcast. And then it just hit me. I was like, Veteran Empire needs its own podcast. I had just finished reading Tim Ferriss's The 4 Hour Work Week for the second time.
Great book. I've read it myself.
Yes, it's one of the few books that I own, and the only book that I don't actually keep. I can just continuously put it into circulation amongst my friends. And I remember Tim Ferriss points out that people will really stop you if you just start doing something. So I just told them, hey guys, I'm gonna do a podcast for Veteran Empire, and then I just started doing it. I started first putting it on SoundCloud, and people were like, hey, this is a good idea. And then I totally reconceptualized it. Instead of it just being me talking about veterans and stuff, I'm just gonna bring vets on the show. And it was wonderful. It was great. I started pumping that stuff into iTunes, and at first it was just my friends, but after a while I started getting veterans who were on TV, and then veterans who were in music, and models and authors and MMA fighters, and before I knew it, like the whole thing just snowballed effect. And 2 years ago, I mean, it's easy now to find podcasting like yourself and Scott Fussell, Frank Gustafson. There's a lot of veteran run and veteran focused podcasts. But 2 years ago, like, we were it, and that's something that I proudly pat myself on the back for. That at the time there was no podcast that was promoting veterans the way that we were.
Right, and really, if you look around, there's still not really that many of them out there that have really gotten much traction or anything yet. And they do cover a host of different subjects, but I am surprised at how underserved that niche currently is. So yeah, I've listened to your podcast. You are a great host, and of course the Veteran Empire product line, some of the clothes and T-shirts they have are awesome. Yeah, some of them, only a military guy, or some of them even only a Marine would understand, and they are classic. The one with the yellow bird sitting on the windowsill.
Yes, that's one of my favorite designs, because one of the missions behind Veteran Empire was we wanted veterans to be able to proudly wear their veteran status on them, without having this "F you, I'm a veteran,"
exactly.
design. And I'm done calling out the businesses that do that, but we all know who they are. And they all have designs that just have all this crazy, I'm more patriotic than you because I'm a veteran, and you don't understand who I am because I'm a veteran, and F you, I served, and all this crap. And we didn't want that. We were like, there's fashionable veterans out there who want like a nice looking tee with a cool design on it that represents them as a vet, without it being in their face. And what's nice about it is, like, the yellow birdie tee, that's a great example of how, it's so inside of the military culture that you couldn't even offend anybody, because people, they don't get it. Even though that, it's funny. I was actually just at home, and my mom saw it. My mom's a huge bird lover, and she was like, "Oh, I like that." I was like, "No, you don't.
You don't want to know the story behind it."
It doesn't end well for the birdie, Mom.
Oh, that's hilarious. So, Now, how is your podcast actually intertwined with the Veteran Empire line? I guess the podcast is sort of just a segment of VE. We have the line, like the product line, and then we have sort of the community, which is the Facebook, the Twitter, and everybody in promoting veterans on there, and people interacting with us. And then we have the podcast. And I suppose if you were to have like those, those graphs where you have two circles sort of overlapping each other, I guess one circle would be the brand, and one circle would be the podcast, and they would sort of just overlap. And in the middle, you'd have community. I think, sometimes we are a little bit separated.
because I am in DC, and they're out in San Diego and LA, and I'm focused on the podcast and getting us affiliated with other veterans while they're focused on new designs and the business aspect. And so there's very little crossover, but we definitely, they push the podcast the same way that I push the product line. So it's best for all of us because they know nothing about the podcast and really don't care, and I don't really know anything about design, but we have a very little overlap, but it works well for us.
Yeah, being coast to coast, it sounds like you definitely got the country bracketed. So going back to thinking about your own transition, what would you tell? There's a lot of veterans in transition right now with the wars winding down and early separations boards and early retirement boards, and all the services are necking down and really getting rid of people. A lot of guys are probably finding themselves on the street on short notice and not expecting it. So there's a huge wave of veterans going through a transition, and we'll be going through a transition here in the near future. Many of them, like you said, will just go out and apply for the job that they think they're qualified for. And one of the things I say all the time is a lot of veterans sell themselves short. They really don't realize what they have, the experience level. And like you said, I find it hard to believe that Marine security guard translates to doorman or night security watch at some company, like you said. But a lot of veterans find themselves into those spots, and then they really lose their mojo there for a while because they don't think that they're capable of doing much more. And of course, you found your way out of it via getting into the entrepreneurship and becoming a podcast host. But really, what I'd like to know is, what do you suggest or what do you recommend for some of those veterans out there that are in transition or getting ready to go through a transition, and they know deep down inside in their heart of hearts that they really don't want to just go get a job?
Yeah. So, the first thing that I would recommend is if you don't know exactly what you want to do. I knew plenty of guys that got out of the Marine Corps, and they knew before they even got out that they were going to go contractor or some job that was going to give them $75,000 to $100,000 a year because of their skill set. And and when you have something that lined up like that, even if it's not something you're going to do for more than 2 or 3 years, go do that, because that's an easy transition into civilian life while still making a really good amount of money and giving you more time to think about it. The next, if you don't have that already lined up, I would start thinking about your education benefits. I think going to college, if you don't have your degree yet when you get out, I think going to college is a great way to have this segue into real life. And I'm still pursuing my degree right now at American University, and it's been wonderful because it's been this buffer time that I've had to really line up Lawson Entertainment the way that I want it to be, without being forced to make it. Lawson Entertainment doesn't need to get all the revenue; it just needs to get enough revenue to sustain it, while my GI Bill benefits help sustain me, and right. and that's been a really good it's helped me transition a little bit better, both as an entrepreneur and as a veteran who's going into the civilian world. Is I'm getting time to really figure out what I want to do, what area I want to pursue, what I really want to. And even if you don't stay, even if for some reason 2 years into it you realize it's not your thing, you were given resources to continue your way of life while figuring out what you want to do. And the caveat off that is if you do decide, and you absolutely should. The education benefits are some of the best benefits that the military can give you. Don't sell yourself short on what school you decide to apply to. I had friends getting out saying they're going to go to the local community college, and I yelled at them. You are guaranteed money to every university out there. They know that they're getting that $18,000 every year from the government if you apply and get accepted to their school. It looks good for them to have a veteran population. Studies have shown that veterans who transition from the military straight into college tend to perform better than their peers. Universities want you in their classroom. So unless you're obviously a failure unless you tell them I'm not going to do anything for your university, they're going to consider you to. I mean, it might be harder for you to get into Columbia, Princeton, and some Ivy League school, and I'm sure there's some other USC and some other top tier schools that maybe our Ivy League are probably still a little bit more competitive. But I'm at a private school that you need the average student needs decent grades to get in here in the first place, and I had no problem getting in here because they know I'm guaranteed money. And then when you go somewhere where your GI Bill can't cover your tuition, like I'm in right now, a lot of schools offer the Yellow Ribbon program, where it's the school and the government pretty much agreeing, hey, we'll actually both chip in to cover the rest of this person's tuition. So I'm getting a $40,000 a year education for the cost of just a couple grand to cover my health insurance that the GI Bill doesn't cover, and a couple other things.
Wow, that was all great information. You can tell that you're a veteran that has gone through the transition process and has learned a lot of those key elements. And once again, I'll say it one more time. A lot of veterans sell themselves short, and that's probably the biggest message I would like to get out to guys is, and you even touched on it too, even if it's just the fact that you're guaranteed money, hey, don't underestimate the power of that when you're looking to get into a particular university or school.
Take advantage of that stuff.
Absolutely. Use everything to your advantage that you possibly can. And I think sometimes in the military, you're surrounded by so many other people like yourself, and it's so highly competitive, you may start to get somewhat of an inferiority complex about where you stand among the general population. And the other thing is, in the military, it's not really good to. We appreciate leadership and value leadership and stress leadership tremendously in the military, but it's not very good to skyline yourself or what might be referred to as showboating or showing off or trying to stick out above the crowd, because it's all about being a member of the team leadership, and looking out for the guy to your left and right. And if you start trying to stand out or stick out, the rest of your team may resent you for that. And so you really get kind of a humble mentality about, I'm just a member of the team. I'm just part of my unit. So I don't really like bragging about myself or talking about how, things that I've done in my military experience has been really good. But when you get out in the civilian world, or you're applying for universities or applying for jobs, you gotta get away from that. You gotta tell people how good you are. And you also touched on something. Even if you've made some mistakes in the past, don't tell everybody your mistakes you've made. Everybody makes mistakes. Just hit the good parts and talk about the things. Talk about your experiences, the things you've learned, the things you've done. Use numbers. I was in charge of 50 Marines, or I had 100 soldiers that I was in charge of. And use things like that, because it's something that they can relate to.
So if you're going to the job market and you're getting ready to apply for jobs, and one thing that veterans make a mistake of is they harp so much on leadership that they forget that you were also a follower. You also took orders, and every company and every employer is going to have to know that you also can do that. You're not going to get hired at the top position in any company when you're coming straight out the gate. And so just barking about how you're a great leader, guess what? There are 2.7 million Iraq and Afghanistan veterans in the job market. But by the time that we pull out of Afghanistan, there'll be 2.7 million veterans in the job market that have served in either Iraq and Afghanistan. That's just Iraq and Afghanistan. I didn't serve in either of those countries, and so I'm in there too. So you're going to sound like every other veteran if you just harp on how great of a leader you are. You need to let them know. You don't have to say I'm an awesome follower, but in your resume should say reported to, and then name some impressive dude, like reported to Commander whoever or General so-and-so or something. Let them know that you were trusted by someone of authority and that you were a follower of that person. You took orders, you gave orders. You were an integral part of the entire system, and not just someone who stood on top making sure things happened.
Well, as I say, you have to be a good follower before you can become a good leader. So that's outstanding advice. I'd never actually looked at it that way. But if you can convey that to a potential employer or a school that you're applying to, I think they'll get that and understand that. Because that's another thing about military service is, out in the civilian world, just getting people to show up to work is like 80% of the battle. Just getting kids to show up to class is 80% of the battle.
Right.
And as a veteran, you're used to getting up in the morning and actually showing up.
Yeah, I know plenty of people. Shannon Erkey's a friend of mine. She's a Marine veteran who just got the cover of Maxim a couple months ago.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and she, I talked to her. I interviewed her in the infancy of the Veteran Empire podcast, and I actually just had her on last month, I believe. And I asked her like what gave her so much success, and she was like, honestly, I just show up. She was like, if you think about it, there, in America, there's such a high demand of hot girls all over the place. Like, what makes you stand out? And she was like, I was 15 minutes early to everything because the Marine Corps, beat that into me. And often that means that I'm the first one seen and the first one who's being dealt with, and I'm interacting with more people before things are getting crowded. I'm first to auditions, stuff like that. And I just thought it was really interesting in such a modeling obviously is such a different industry from what you deal with in the military,
right.
But yet the disciplines that she learned in the military is what's making her successful in modeling.
Yeah, that's an amazing story. She's the only model that showed up 15 minutes early, huh?
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, because I've heard stories of how models get, obviously they're being pulled in every direction, and they're trying to capitalize on so many different opportunities. I think it's sort of hard for them to remain punctual. But Shannon was always she was 15 minutes early. She was on time. She took orders, listened, and stuff like that. So it doesn't have to be the industry you're going into doesn't have to look like it's structured like the military for you to be able to take those values and disciplines that you got from the military and succeed in them.
And showing up early for a photo shoot or whatever, showing up early for work or class seems like such a simple concept. But maybe I'm a little warped or tainted after 24 years. And but it brings up a good point. That's just a simple, basic thing. But that's one thing that most veterans already have mastered: the simple basics. And that's what employers recognize, and universities also. They recognize the simple basics. You're going to show up, and you're usually going to do what you're told to do. That's a huge part of it.
Absolutely.
And I think a lot of veterans don't realize how much they've grown and matured through their military service, as to compared to how they were when they were a little snot-nosed kid right out of high school. So would you view yourself as an entrepreneur? Would you view yourself as someone who doesn't have that typical job right now?
Yeah, I would definitely consider myself an entrepreneur. It's interesting. Entrepreneur comes with such stigma anymore because it's such a fun word for people to use, and it's trendy, like, oh, I'm an entrepreneur, and then you start like tagging it with fun entrepreneur, like I'm a social entrepreneur or I'm a startup entrepreneur or whatever. Yeah. And people start using it as like this trendy way to identify themselves. I call myself an entrepreneur because I don't have a better answer for anybody. Like when I remember going to Thanksgiving with my girlfriend, and one of her cousins was like, "So what do you do?" And I kind of was like, I don't know how to answer that. I host podcasts, but that probably doesn't. Most people don't understand how you can make money off of talking into a microphone.
Yeah, or they don't even know what a podcast is.
Yeah, that's also the word. Yeah, that's also a bad part. And I do so many other things. I'm a full-time student. I host 3-4 podcasts now, and I do speakings and public speaking now. And so I got so many things that that I do. And then part of the ways that I make money to sustain myself is I do internet marketing for a realtor, and that's sort of like a side job that I do. But I don't like to say that that's what I do just because it's making money. Because that's not who I am. I'm a podcast host. Long story short, I identify myself as an entrepreneur just to summarize it for everybody.
Well, Tim, you've definitely given us some sage advice on transition and what it's like being out there in the entrepreneurial world and your experiences as a podcast host. And I really look forward to seeing your successes and rising to the top in the podcast world, because you're already well on your way, especially with the Veteran Empire podcast. And you can tell that your veteran experience as a Marine has propelled you out into the civilian world, and I'm sure you're doing great in school. And some great information and advice for veterans out there in transition from you, Tim. So I appreciate that, and hope to stay in touch with you. And let me know how your podcast is going, and I may be calling you for some advice once in a while too.
Absolutely. I'd be glad to talk to you. I think, some of my favorite, I have podcast hosts on the VE podcast occasionally, and there's some of my favorite podcasts I do because I get to talk to someone who's in my industry and who has the same, values and disciplines as I do and roots in the military. And it's fun to see veterans getting into this industry and sort of finding that niche that they want to do. I know plenty of veteran podcasters that have, podcasts that aren't focused on the military and veterans. Like, John Lee Dumas is a veteran. He has one of the biggest podcasts out right now with Entrepreneur on Fire. So, it's great seeing vets getting into this industry. And, if anybody wants to check out the Veteran Empire podcast to hear about some cool veterans and some cool conversation. What I like about that show is we always start with, why'd you join the military, to sort of set that foundation. And then we immediately start transitioning into what they're doing now. And we get some great insight into some really cool industries.
All right, Tim. Well, that's awesome, and really appreciate you coming on the show today. It's been great talking with you, and like I said, I look forward to seeing your future success and talking with you some more. So that's it. That's it for this episode, and I'm Oscar Mike. Thank you for listening to Veteran on the Move, your pathfinder to freedom. Don't forget to leave us a review on iTunes. Reviews are always greatly appreciated. So until next time, this veteran is Oscar Mike.